Today we have a 2019 Ford Escape. It's an SE model. It's got the 1.5 motor. It's an all-wheel drive. The customer said it's making a terrible noise in the front, and when we drove it, it needs new brakes and rotors. We're going to show you where those are located and how to do it. We're going to start off by removing the 5 lug nuts, of course. This is a 3/4 socket. This is actually just like an anti-rattle. You got to be careful when you take this off that it doesn't get you, but just kind of keep your hand over it like that. Pry it around like that, and that releases it. And now, and you can see on this rotor, they went way too long on that. It started to grind into the rotor. If they would have changed it when the brake indicator squeakers started making noise, they wouldn't have had to buy rotors, but now they got to get a rotor. Okay, it's got these little caps on the back. You just pry those out like that. At an angle like that. Now these are a T45. Put that in like that. Break that loose. Break that one loose. To save a second, I'm going to use the gun. You want to make sure right here that this pushes all the way back. If you can see, I don't know if you can see it right there, but you want to make sure that pushes back. You might have to get a screwdriver and put it back. Just like that. We'll do the same thing on the bottom. Now, if you push those back, you want to grab these out of here, because if you don't, sometimes they catch. It makes it harder to get the caliper out of there. You just pull them out. You got to grease them up anyway. So pull that out. And we'll pull the caliper off. Okay, just pull that off like that. And you can tell on this front side, it's totally wore. So push that up there. And then I'm going to take my bracket off, because we do have to replace the rotors, you can see. 18 socket. Just got to break these loose. There's one. Once I get it broke loose, I'll put the impact on it. Unless you don't have an impact, then you'll finish it off this way. There's one. Hang on this bracket. And there's 2. You might have to tunk it with a hammer to break that loose, because this is right from the factory. It's only got 60. But as you can see, they waited a little too long, and now they got to buy a rotor because of it. Put this in here, and we're going to push it back. Now you want to make sure this piston goes back nice and easy, just like that. If you got to struggle at all, like I said, this car's only got 60, but if it struggles at all, I'm just using one finger. So it's got to go back that easy, and your caliper's fine. So we're just going to replace the pads and the rotor. Like I said, this went back easy, so the caliper's fine. We don't have to replace it. You just pull this out. This one wasn't that bad, it was just the front side. And you do want to make sure that your puck, like that, is nice and flush. Sometimes these rotors will have like something hold them in here, like a screw, a Torx, or whatever. But this one has nothing, so all you got to do is persuade it with a hammer. And even being a 19, they don't always move well. Just like that. Make sure you do not hit your threads. Take this off, and then we're going to go match it up with a new one to make sure it's the proper size. These are the pads we're using, a gold. You got your cheap ones, or like a silver, gold, or platinum. The golds seem to be as good as OEM, so we use those to save a little money. We use our disc brake quiet. We put it on the back of the pads to make it so it hopefully doesn't squeak. And brake clean. You're going to use this for cleaning the rotors. When the rotors are stored in like a warehouse and that, they put like some kind of residue, some kind of grease on it, so it doesn't rust, because it could be stored a couple years. So we're gonna have to get that off before we install it. Sometimes, for whatever reason, you do get the wrong part, so you just want to line that up, make sure the lug nuts are the same, the holes are the same, and it is the same size. So now we're going to clean this and install it. Use the brake clean on it. Clean this off like that to get the residue off it. Okay, we'll spin that over. Do the other side. Okay, all ready to install. And of course, you just grab it where you're not going to touch it. Obviously, my hands are dirty, so you got to be careful you grab it. But we can always spray it with brake clean once we get it over here, so you don't grab the rotor itself. Put that on there. I like to put a lug nut in there to hold it in place. so I'm not fighting it. Spin that on. We're ready to put our caliper bracket on. Now, it depends how many miles and all that on the car. Sometimes you want to take a wire brush just and clean it if it has too much rust. I already cleaned these off. Now I'm going to reinstall it, which if I can do it without being in the way of the camera. Slide that in like that. It was a little harder to do it because I was trying to stay out of the way of the camera, of course. But here, these are the 18s. Hit that. I'm going to go back and double check that. Like I mentioned before, we use the disc brake quiet. They're supposed to have some kind of coating on there to help against noise, but I always just put this on just in case it helps even more. And for whatever reason, they don't have a squeaker on this model. Some of them do, some of them don't, but it does have a new one of these. Let's let this dry off and install these. So we double check the 18s. We're letting this dry a little, but what you have to do is squeeze these in to make sure they fit in there, which sometimes can be a little pain, and then push it in place like that. And it should just snap in like that. Next thing we'll do is put this one on right here, like that. Pull this one down. Make sure this hose isn't kinked at all. And it should slide right into place. Just like that. These are exactly the same length. Double check that when you take them out. Make sure they're not any different. Sometimes some of them have like an O-ring or some kind of seal on it, but these are the same. You want to lube them well and then install them like that. Just like that. Do the same thing to the bottom. These aren't well lubricated. Your brakes won't slide or work properly sliding back and forth. Come on, right there. You might have to wiggle it around a little. You want it to start just like that. That one's going in, you can see. Do the same thing on the bottom. Okay, we're gonna tighten these up. Okay, there's one. We just snug the bottom one there. You just want to make sure that it's, I usually can't cross thread, but you just want to make sure it's not cross threaded. Get this in, then I'll tighten them up. So we tightened our 18s, installed the brake pads, put our Torx in, tighten those, and now I'm going to take a little grease. These just have these caps, if you remember. Put a little on it like that. Push that in there and let it ooze out. Just like that. I'd rather have too much grease than not enough. Do the same thing to the other one. Put some in there. Put it right there. Push this one in. Okay. We're going to wipe off the excess. We just make sure that brake line's not kinked or twisted in any way. Straighten this out. And we're going to take our lug nut off. Doesn't work that good with grease on your hands. Okay, last thing we're going to do is install this. And I like to do it, put the bottom in like that. Got to get the... Okay, like that. You got the bottom one there, got this one. Pull this forward like that. And then pull this. You can see this one's done. This one's kind of in. Now we're going to pull this out like that. Push it in place. Just like that. You can tunks it back in place. Now you're going to want to take a hammer and make sure those are flush. Make sure it's sitting like that. Last thing you do is install the wheel and tire. We started by hand, of course. We're going to hit it in a crossing pattern. Okay, and we're going to lower it down. We're going to torque the spec on the lug nuts. And that's all it takes to do pads and rotors on a 2019 Ford Escape SE all-wheel drive with a 1.5 motor.